Article 13. The Islamic Republic of Iran. This article was written before the current war and the expected regime change within Iran. Iran should be one of the great countries in the world, but instead has become the enemy of civilization. Since 1979, the world has borne witness to increasing cycles of violence and utter hatred from Iran, increasing emboldened due to the actual lack of action from those who claim to be the bearers of civilization. Yet, being unwilling to protect civilization hardly makes anyone civilized. It just makes them complacent and complicit in the violence unfolding. As such, the greatest threat to civilization emerged from those who claim to be civilized, yet allow barbarism. This became even more evident when Iran began to manufacture enriched uranium-235, the stuff of nightmares. The world largely chose to ignore this maniac behaviour from a country sworn to destroy much of the West. Through levels of sanctions that did not halt the uranium, ostensibly believing the extremist Iranian government when it stated the enriched uranium was for peaceful purposes, then the level of U-235 required for peaceful purposes was exceeded deep in secret underground chambers, and still the world done only the bare minimum to halt the nightmare scenario. Iran should be one of the great countries in the world. Just look at it. The country has resources, none more than the intellect and culture of its people. Yet, 90% of the people are governed by the other 10%, who are the bad and mad men intent on spewing their hatred across the entire world in order to justify their own existence. Whereas much of the world is attempting to progress, Iran attempts by force and by funding extremist groups to drag the world back into medieval horror. For decades now, there have been episodes of riots and eternal attempts to overthrow the unrepresentative government of Iran, and yet the lunatics remain in charge of the asylum, and worse, it is widely believed they have now reached the U-235 threshold to develop nuclear weapons. And what will they do with these weapons? Whereas the West makes excuses of Iran for not having the delivery missile technology, the Iranians don't care because there are plenty of insane suicide bombers willing to be the trigger for global meltdown. And yet, there was another trigger. October 2023, and the world experienced yet another cycle of craziness, of course centred on the Middle East, where Iranian-backed Palestinian terrorists attacked Israel and committed the most horrific acts against unarmed civilians. Some of these horrific acts were so grim and demonic that even now I cannot bring myself to speak about them. For years, the Palestinians have been in receipt of massive amounts of foreign aid to bribe them to be peaceful, yet, stupid as the West has been, these huge amounts of money have been used for arms, not schools, bombs, not hospitals, training an army, not feeding the population. And then the Palestinians claim to be the victims as year after year they stockpiled Iranian missiles whose intent it was to light the fuse for a wider regional conflict. If only Israel would respond. Of course, Israel responded. They are Israelis, it's what they do. The situation manufactured by the extremists in Iran because that's what they do. Yet, what do we see in the world today? We see through the West mass demonstrations in support of terrorism, with people openly calling for death and destruction, quietly funded by Iran once more to undermine civilization. Yet look closely and you'll see two types of people in these mass demonstrations. The first lot of people are migrants from the Middle East who come to the West to escape the troubles in their homeland, yet serve only to perpetuate and spread the hate. The second lot of people are usually middle-class Westerners who just want to demonstrate about anything and everything, and who clearly have limited ability to understand the truth. And so, what is the truth? Truth is, the conflict we see today, the conflict that may well still escalate into a regional war, that may in fact escalate into a global war, with all the death and destruction that idiots seem to be calling for, has actually nothing to do with Palestine. The truth is, the Palestinian people, and especially the Palestinian terrorists, are being funded and used as pawns by a failed state, determined only to perpetuate that death and destruction at any cost. That failed state is Iran. For a long time now, Iran has been funding terrorist groups and also regional wars, for example, Yemen, as a means of increasing the reach of their medieval ideology and distracting from their failed domestic government. Yet, in spite of the warnings, in spite of a fake moral indignation, even as the Iranian people have suffered due to economic mismanagement, Iran has continued to pour money into the enrichment of uranium-235. The peaceful production of nuclear energy usually required between 3 to 5% of U-235. The original deal signed with Iran in exchange for a limited lifting of economic sanctions limited the amount of enrichment in Iran to around 3.67%. Because, as the Iranians consistently stated, their enrichment process was for peaceful purposes only. Therefore, they would not need higher than 3.67%. At this point, it should be noted that although peaceful nuclear energy requires between 3 to 5% of uranium-235, nuclear weapons require around 95%. And behind the scenes, even as the Iranians were stating publicly they were holding fast to the original 3.67% deal, actually, they weren't. Everyone knew the Iranians were lying, but through a combination of that complacency and the West's own commercial interests, the West publicly ignored the increasing levels of uranium-235 within Iran. And so the levels crept up and far beyond what was required for peaceful energy production. Way beyond. Iran did this because it always wanted nuclear weapons. It wanted to hold the world to ransom and spread its medieval ideology of hate and destruction and suppression. And so slowly but surely, the uranium levels continued to creep up. The world has reached a situation now whereby the level of enriched uranium-235 within Iran has reached that deadly 95% level required for nuclear weapons. It's an open secret. And now the complacent, unwilling guardians of civilization is hesitant to attack Iran or even impose further sanctions for fear of nuclear fallout. In fact, the fallout from not just one nuclear weapon, but it is estimated enough for 5. And at the same time, the Iranians are indeed perfecting their ballistic missile technology. And you can be sure the Iranian-backed terrorist groups are lining up for the dubious honour of detonating the first Iranian nuclear bomb. I'm just surprised the terrorist groups are not publicly stating this is also for peaceful means, because they lie about everything else. The fact is, the current Palestinian war was funded and initiated by Iran, and Iran is on the verge of creating its first ever nuclear weapons, some of which may be missiles, some of which may be bombs. It is also clear the Iranian regime is preparing to test the first nuclear weapon. So, in the hands of such a brutal and destructive regime, what do you think will happen next? Well, as a start, apart from threatening the world, as has been stated, they will very likely give one of these new weapons to one of the terrorist groups they're so fond of using as pawns. And that nuclear weapon in the hands of suicide bomber mentality will be used to attack Israel. Forgive the pun, but the attack will undoubtedly set off a chain reaction of events that is likely to cause mass destruction throughout the Middle East and leave behind vast tracts of uninhabitable land. Saudi Arabia has publicly stated that if Iran develops a nuclear weapon, then they, KSA, will procure a nuclear weapon of their own. And then, radioactive dust throughout Iran, Israel, Syria, Iraq, Jordan, Lebanon, perhaps even Egypt, Turkey, Afghanistan, depending on the winds. Do you think this is unlikely? Unfortunately, through a range of scenarios, this is probably the most likely outcome. If the collective West continues with its misguided belief in the goodness of human nature and the ostrich approach of sticking their heads in the sand, believing the problem will go away, that bad things happen only to other people, or in the case of more than one US president who have attempted to bribe the extremist Iranian government with plane loads of cash. The problem isn't going away because it is being ignored. It's about to become very much worse because the Iranian government is indeed the enemy of civilization. But then again, so is the weak West, especially as is rumoured there is at least one major West European country who has for years been actively seeking to circumvent Iranian sanctions to boost their own commercial prospects. They have a history of doing these things. But that certain Western European country has a long history also of working with the enemies of civilization. And all the while, the riots and protests inside Iran continue as the brave Iranians attempt to overthrow their maniac government and main destabilizing force within the region and within the world.
A series of articles by J.S. Stuart. Number 1. The 3,000-year-old war. Number 2. The aging process. Number 3. AI, the first level of control. Number 4. AI informatics. Number 5. The continuing AI revolution. Number 6. China. Number 7. Data. Do we understand what's about to happen? Number 8. Disability. Do we pretend to care? Number 9. Fear. Number 10. Hypnosis, eroticism for women. Number 11. Hypnosis, managing stress. Number 12. Inspiration in the age of AI. Number 13. Islamic Republic of Iran, the enemy of civilization, written before the latest war. Number 14. Why do women often prefer more mature men? Number 15. Program Rescue. Number 16. Rewriting History. Number 17. Tao. Number 18. The Art of Seduction. Number 19. The Audacity of Hope. Number 20. The Essence of Negotiation. Number 21. The Future of Warfare.